Now we are recording.
All right. So, when I was about 8 years old, we moved from Jackson Parkway in Holyoke, which was the city public housing. No grass, no lawn, no nothing.
Hang out under the cars and smell the exhaust.
Yeah, hang out under the cars to smell the gas. We moved to South Hadley, across the river, Connecticut River, and our house was on a nice, quiet street, and behind us was grass, savanna, and then right up to a mountain, including Mount Holyoke. So all of a sudden, all this nature was all around us, and it was fabulous. And one time I came bopping down the stairs outside the door, out to the outside yard, and there, hanging off some arborvitae trees, were some long orange jelly things about this long, and about as big around, as a little skinnier than your little finger. And they were just kind of dangling there. And they hadn't been there the day before when I went to bed. Overnight, these things had landed in the arborvitae tree. And the only explanation that I had was they were aliens, that space creatures had invaded our yard, and they looked like dangling orange jellies. So, of course, I went to get my dad, and he came out and said, oh, that's the fruiting body of the cedar apple rust. You'll notice that we have cedar trees right here, and right around the corner of the house there's an apple tree. And this organism requires both trees to survive. It spends part of its life on a cedar tree, and then it spends the rest of its life on an apple tree. And without one of those trees, it can't live. But happy for it, there it is. The fruiting body of the cedar apple rust, I think. Fungus. Anyway, great. Thank you, Grandpa. Thank you, Dad. Meanwhile, Mr. Bach, who was our neighbor a few houses down and owned a dog that came out and tried to kill you every time you bicycled by, he came to visit the house when we first moved in, and he wanted to let us know what the plan was for civil defense. Because at that time, 1954 or 55, everybody was worried about the Russians, and they were going to kill us. And we lived near Westover Air Force Base, which was the home base of the B-52s that carried the nuclear weapons that would that were designed to tell Russia, if you start something, you will turn into a desert, and we've got the planes to do it.
And we've done it before.
And we have technology. And some of those planes were always in the air. So some pilots would go to work in the morning, they'd get in the airplane, and they'd drive around for 24 hours, waiting to take a right-hand turn and go kill Russia. That was their whole function. And they needed fuel, so as kids, we got to watch them practice refueling from these big C-147 flying gas tanks, and a little snout would go down to the plane. And so we knew that Westover Air Force Base was certainly targeted by the Russians, because whatever planes they could get on the ground, they wanted to make sure never got off the ground. So we knew that our neighborhood was at the end of a missile pointed our way. And occasionally, I don't remember if we ever saw them come out of the planes, but there was a technique for avoiding radar where the planes would eject a lot of mylar film streamers, and it would go down as a cloud, and the radar would hit the cloud and not be able to tell who was hiding inside the cloud. So we would find those scattered across the ground. And we also knew some of our neighbors were Westover servicemen. 'Cause, we also knew that there was a thing called the Distant Early Warning Line, the DEW line, and it was a series of radar stations in Canada. And their job was to wake up every day and never go to sleep and just look. Is anything coming over the top of the earth towards the United States? Because if it is, we're going to tell the guys who are in the air to take a right-hand turn and go bomb Moscow. So those are all part of the background. That summer, my dad took me out in the dark to show me Sputnik. And, you know, even though Sputnik was not a weapon, it was more evidence that the Russians were capable and powerful. Oh, and now I'll get back to Mr. Bach. He shows up at the house and he says, I'm going to explain the civil defense system for people here on our street. And I'm pretty sure Grandpa took a dislike to him instantly. So Mr. Bach says...
About as much as Panucci likes those squirrels outside. I apologize.
That's all right. It's your video. Mr. Bach explains that when the balloon goes up, we are to travel to the big buildings in Holyoke, the city across the river, where they have extensive cans of water and jujubes, and go down in the cellar and wait out the radioactive cloud that will no doubt be our inheritance, because Westover is going to look like a hole. And Grandpa says, you know, we just moved here from Holyoke. You know what their plan is? No, says Mr. Bach. Their plan is for everybody to get in their car and go to the country and disperse so they won't be part of the attack on the city. Then Grandpa says, and you know what happens at 5 o'clock at the bridge over the Connecticut River? Every day at 5 o'clock, there's a traffic jam until hell won't have it, because everybody's leaving or entering the city. Do you think that traffic jam is going to be any less bad when the nuclear war's happening? And he said, do you think the cops who whistle in direct traffic, do you think they're going to show up for work that day? No, because they'll all be going to get their families and take them to safety.
Yeah.
So he said, I have a civil defense plan, and it is that if there is a war, I'm going to come to this house, pick up my family, and get the hell out. And speaking of that, you get out. That's enough. Don't talk to me anymore about this stuff. I'm remembering that in that conversation also was Mr. Bach suggesting that we sign a petition or in some way support the town of South Hadley putting up streetlights on our town. And I guess I blame this on my mother, but my mother's and maybe Grandpa's picture of streetlights was in Holyoke, where there were streetlights all over the place. What happened is that kids would gather to play basketball until 10 or 11 o'clock at night, because that's where the light was. And they sure as hell didn't want anybody playing basketball,
right,
on Pearl Street. So once again, no to your petition. Get out. Go away. Don't ever bother us again. Grandpa was a great guy. Then, in that time, in late summer, the whole family was inside the house. It was dark, and they were shooting the breeze and drinking coffee and telling stories and whatever they did around the dinner table. And I was, for whatever reason, I was outside. And I observed for the first time in my life the Aurora Borealis. And it wasn't just some pale, limpid aurora. It was maybe I don't know if it was the finest I've ever seen, but it was awesome. They weren't just pale blues and greens, they were bright reds, and it was all from the north where the aurora lives. Well, that's where the missiles are coming from when the Soviets decide to take us out. So since I had like the orange jellies, I had no context for this event except nuclear war. So I was sure that those that light that I saw was nuclear missiles raining down on the dew line, destroying their ability to track the next set of incoming whatever the hell was coming. And of course they were coming. So I felt so heavy with the idea that my family was going to be destroyed, and that I knew that ahead of time. They didn't know that, so they were still living in the past, and I had this power to kill them, or that's not right, but it was hard for me to walk. I just was oppressed by this knowledge, and but I got to the back door and called my dad to come out, and so he could know what I knew. And then he told me what he knew, which was about the aurora borealis and about how it happens and what it was and what a magnificent thing it was. And so that, combined with the tremendous relief that the threat of death was over, was a very significant moment in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So Grampa tamped the missiles back into their silos, wherever the hell they were. Told Mr. Bach to go fry ice.
And save the world.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dad.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking.